Sometimes one simple phone call can tell you more than 1,000 studies ever could. Today, we're looking at a viral social experiment that really kicked off a global conversation about charity, faith, and what happens when someone in desperate need actually asks for help.
So let's dive right in. We're going to unpack the story of a TikToker whose simple but, wow, incredibly powerful experiment uncovered a pretty startling contrast in how different faith-based institutions respond to a cry for help.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Who was the person behind this whole thing? And how did her videos just completely blow up and grab the world's attention so fast?
Well, this wasn't just some random idea she had. The TikToker, Nicole Monroe, actually works with people who are recovering from addiction. And she keeps sharing the same story over and over. They'd go to churches asking for help and just get turned away. So she decided, okay, I've got to see for myself if this is really what's happening.
And what she found, well, it struck a massive chord online. I mean, just look at this growth. She went from about 400 followers to over 500,000 in just 2 weeks. The story clearly deeply resonated with a ton of people.
So how did she actually set this experiment up? Because to get genuine reactions, she had to create a scenario that felt completely real and, urgent.
Her method was simple, but man was it effective. She would call up, posing as a mother in this desperate situation, needing baby formula right away. And to really make it convincing, she even played the sound of a baby crying in the background. With that whole scenario set, she started calling these organizations, the ones that claim to help the poor, ready to document how they'd really respond in a crisis.
All right, so first up, she turned her attention to Christian churches all across the United States. She started making call after call just to see what kind of help, if any, she would get.
And we're not talking about just 1 or 2 calls here. She documented her calls to 26 different churches. She was thorough. And as she kept calling, a really distinct and consistent pattern started to emerge.
The responses, they were overwhelmingly bureaucratic. So picture this. You're on the phone, a baby is crying, and instead of immediate help, you get paperwork. It was all, you need to fill out an application, or the approval process takes 1 to 2 weeks. Some just said they had nothing to offer. And one, according to her recordings, just hung up the phone. Now look, large organizations often have these systems in place to manage resources and guard against fraud. But for a person in a real crisis, that process can feel like a slammed door.
And if you think that's something, the reaction after the videos went viral was just as telling. Instead of maybe reflecting on the issue, some church representatives reportedly criticized Monroe, calling her act despicable. Others even claimed she was trying to deceive them or was possessed.
Okay, so that was one side of the coin. Now let's get to the next part of the experiment, because this is where the contrast becomes incredibly powerful. After calling 26 churches, Monroe made one more call, this time to a local mosque.
And the difference in the response was, well, it was night and day. It was immediate and so striking. The person on the other end didn't hesitate at all. Their very first words were about reassurance and a direct offer of help.
Think about that. There were no questions about her name, her religion, or her background. No forms to fill out, nothing. The focus was 100% on the immediate problem, with the person on the phone basically saying that helping a hungry child was simply their duty.
So the big question is, why were the responses so wildly different? Well, the source material really digs into the cultural and religious principles that might just explain this stark contrast.
Now, with results this polarizing, people were going to be skeptical, right? As the videos blew up, accusations of fake started to fly. So to counter this, Monroe just released the receipts. She put out all of her evidence, the call logs, the full recordings, the timings, to prove that the experiment was genuine and exactly as she presented it.
The sources suggest that the mosque's immediate action is deeply, deeply rooted in Islamic principles. Get this. The Quran, Islam's holy book, mentions the duty to help those in need over 700 times. That makes charity a central pillar of the faith.
And this is tied to concepts like sadaqah. That's a term for voluntary charity, the kind that's given out of pure compassion or love. It's seen as a virtuous act and is totally separate from zakat, which is the obligatory or required form of charity. The whole idea is that giving is just a fundamental virtue.
So the core principles that the source highlights really emphasize helping without delay, not asking about someone's background, and not making them feel ashamed for asking. Providing aid is framed not as an option, but as a moral and religious duty. It's a help-first approach.
So in the end, this whole viral moment moves way beyond a single phone call. It raises a much, much larger question about the role these institutions are meant to play in our communities today.
And this slide just lays it out perfectly.
It illustrates the two very different philosophies that the experiment seemed to reveal. On one side, what the source calls a business model, which is dependent on process and paperwork, and on the other, a community support center, which is focused on immediate, unconditional aid.
And that really gets to the heart of the key takeaway from the source material, the difference between what's professed and what's practiced. The argument is that true faith is shown not just by what you call yourself, but by tangible actions that actually benefit the community.
And so, this one TikToker social experiment leaves us all with a really powerful question to think about. In a moment of genuine, urgent crisis, what is the true role of these institutions? What should we expect from the very organizations designed to be pillars of support in our communities? It's a question worth considering.